All right, so we are going to start off here going over our exclamation points and question marks from last week from Oregon's 41-7 win over Oregon State. The Ducks got out to a bit of a slow start. Oregon State was able to tie it up at 7-7 pretty early into that one in the first quarter, but then after that, it was all Oregon. Reeled off 5 straight scoring drives, shut down the Beavers the rest of the way. Oh, and I'm going to give you the floor first. What was something that had you excited from this Week 4 game against Oregon State?
Yeah, I mean, in the first quarter, I wasn't excited about this rushing defense, but I'm really excited that it seemed like they made adjustments in game. They didn't really want to talk about what those adjustments were. Understandably, in the post game, but the fact that they changed stuff in the middle of the game and said, hey, this isn't working, and it worked. They allowed something like 42 yards in the first quarter, bring up the stat again, and then 25 in the next 3.
Yeah.
Oregon State is not the kind of rushing attack that the Ducks are going to face in State College, but it's. I'm excited because they made a change, in battle, and it worked.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to my first point as well, because for me, it's specifically when you look at the rush defense, it's the interior of the defensive line that really took a step forward in this Oregon State game. I thought they played a lot more consistently. Like Dan Lanning said, they were getting knocked back at the line of scrimmage, playing with better pad level, getting their hands to these offensive linemen and be able to control where they're going. It was a lot more consistent from a lot of those guys on the interior of that defensive line. And Oregon made a switch to their lineup for the first time this season. They moved Barry Alexander they put him in the starting lineup next to Amari Washington, moved Keyon Gray to a more rotational role, and he did really good in that. It was his highest graded game by PFF, but also just when I was watching it on Saturday, when I was watching things back last night, when I was watching the secondary tape, Keyon Gray was a guy that kind of stood out to me a lot from that game, even though he was playing he played his fewest snaps this season, but he makes his first tackle of the year. I thought he had some really impactful plays against the run. I thought Amari Washington too played a lot better than he did again in that Northwestern game. He's a guy that's so athletic, so powerful, so explosive at the line of scrimmage that you really want to see him, be as productive of a player as he can be. He had, 4 run stops near at the line of scrimmage in that first game of the season, and he had 1 in week 2, and then hasn't had any in the last couple of weeks. Didn't have any tackles in that game this past weekend. So I thought his pad level was a lot better this weekend. He had some plays where he really, was in the backfield and helping other people make tackles and had some strong plays. But I just want to see that production from him because he's a guy with as much raw talent as he has. He can be one of the best against the pass, against the run, interior defenders in the entire country.
Yeah, and especially because it felt like more of the time Hankerson was a guy who was going to go up the middle in that game. That was really important, and that's where they gashed the Ducks in the first quarter. Both the running backs in that game were able to get runs of 9 or 10 or 11 yards a couple times on that long touchdown drive where they eventually punched it in. So I'm curious. I was interested. I remember talking to Jack when Barry Alexander started. And I was like, oh, that is interesting. And I know, like you said, maybe he didn't pop up that much, but just the fact that he was there shows a little bit of a development in that room because he wasn't a guy who was there at the start of the year, but he's obviously a guy who has a ton of experience in college football. And part of me starts to think, hey, like you love Keyon Gray, but is this a move to say, we're going into a really difficult environment. We want a guy who we understand, knows how to play, has played, in an SEC school, in Pac-12 and Big Ten play. Do you think that had any impact on that change?
Yeah, I think Bear has just been really good this year in general against the run. He's done a really good job eating some of those double teams, being able to come off of them and make tackles or help make tackles near the line of scrimmage. He was a guy that came into this season with a lot of attention surrounding him due to the fact that he's kind of, he's left programs in the past. He hasn't necessarily lived up to some of the excitement and hype that has surrounded him at some of those previous places, Georgia and USC. But this season, I think taking a bit more of a backseat role where Amari Washington is that guy on the interior of the defensive line that kind of opens things up for everyone else, and then he can work things around that. He's been a really good run defender this season, and you noticed it early on. They were bringing him in for some of these third and short situations to be that guy next to Amari. So I think they just trust him out there a bit more than some of those young guys like Keyon Gray and Terrence Green at this point. And I think we're going to continue to see him out there on those early run stopping downs. They get Keyon Gray and Terrence Green rotated in for those first and 10s for some of those rundowns. But when it is, third and short, fourth and short crunch time, it's Bear Alexander's in the middle there next to Amari Washington. And he's been able to stop a lot of plays early this season.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, I was really excited by Dante's scrambling performance here. It felt like he was really able to get on the move. Something we saw a lot from guys like Bo and Dylan, because none of these guys, I think we talked about this after the game, are like real rushing threats. Dante said he's like, hey, I'm not the fastest guy. I understand that. But he kind of has that now, where he's able to pick up his head and realize everybody's back is turned, and he's able to go get 10 yards. He's able to go get, I think it was 21 on that one where it felt like he could have gotten 30.
28.
Yeah. 28. And Sadiq didn't pick up that block. That was what excited me, because it's just a different element to his game. That's something that Penn State will have to account for. And he did a little bit in these past games, so we got worried because he was putting himself in harm's way so much. But it really felt like he scrambled with a purpose in this game. The last times it was just, oh man, the pocket's collapsing, let me go.
Yeah, he's not necessarily a rushing threat in the way that some of these other quarterbacks around the country, obviously he's not a Tommy Castellanos at Florida State, obviously, where he is a big part of their running game, and they're not really using him. They've ran a couple, QB draws. They ran him on a counter play earlier this season. They've done a couple of those QB runs, but even less so than what they were doing. I think Bo Nix was the best running threat out of Dan's quarterbacks, but they're even doing more. They did more so with Dylan in terms of the run game than Dante has done early this season. But like you said, just the scrambles, a lot of those yards came off scrambles. He scrambled for a couple of first downs, and just being able to pick up those 4 or 5 yards on a scramble. You're going to make that second or third down easier, even if you're not able to pick up that first down. And it's also not a negative play for the offense, because you're not putting the ball in danger and potentially throwing an interception, or even, just throwing it in incompletion where you're going to get no yards at all. So like Dante said, it kind of offers another threat to the defense, where it's something else they got to worry about as well. They can't just sit back and know that he's going to pass. I mean, he is a drop back passer. That's his main skill set. But when they give him a look, because these teams are going to start getting worried about his explosive passing down the field, because we've seen it over these last couple of weeks, that he can take those easy yards underneath. And that's something that quarterbacks, you really in this modern game, have to be able to threaten. And it's something that you saw when CJ Stroud was a QB prospect coming out of Ohio State a couple of years ago. People were really doubtful of him, initially in that kind of scouting process, of his ability to, be a guy who moves and can scramble around a little bit. And then he comes out in that Georgia game and he's throwing it all over the place against Georgia. They end up losing it on a missed field goal, but he's throwing the ball all over the place against Georgia. He's forced into these scramble situations because Georgia's defensive front is so good. And I thought we saw some of that from Dante in this game. Not necessarily that Oregon State defensive front was so good that it forced him into these situations, but he was just making those smart reads and tucking and running when he had to. Yeah,
and this kid has no fear. He's gonna go try to get the hard yards, which is something. It's something you love to see in your quarterbacks, right? He's shown that if the first down is a yard away, he's gonna put his head in there and try to get the yards.
And I think it was important just for him to show, hey, I can't have a game where I have 50 yards on the ground scrambling. And it was more than that, because he took a 9-yard sack too. So it was really almost 60 scramble yards for him in that game. Now, that's something that Penn State has to think about this weekend. That not necessarily are they going to spy or contain Dante Moore in a way you would with some of these other running quarterbacks. But hey, somebody has to worry about him, because if we do play man coverage over the top, or man coverage across the board, and put our safeties over the top, that leaves plenty of room with everyone's back turned for Dante to be able to pick up those scramble yards.
Absolutely. Where are we going next?
All right, for me, the next thing that had me excited was just the usage that Kenyon Sadiq got in this game. It was the first game where I said coming into the season, and once Evan Stewart went down, this was something that I said that I thought Kenyon Sadiq was going to lead this team in targets this year. And this was the first game that he actually did do that. 7 targets for him on the game. Tied his career high with 4 catches, new career high 60 yards for him. We really saw him be that kind of number 1 option tight end that I thought he could be this season. They haven't really just schemed things up for him that much in general this year. He's kind of been coming out of these first couple of games. He'll have 1-2 catches, but he'll end up, he's got 3 touchdowns through 4 games. So he's clearly a part of the red zone plan. And, that's something Oregon's done. They're 20 for 20 on red zone in the red zone this season. They've done it very, very efficiently. But he's clearly a very big part of that plan in the red zone. And I think that tells you that he's going to be a part of this offense. I mean, obviously we knew this, but I think he is going to be a central focal point of this offense as they go through this conference schedule this season. There were a couple of times too where Dante Moore checked down to him on, there was a 2nd and 10 and then a 2nd and 19 where he checked down to Sadiq on a little stick route for 5 or 6 yards. And then Sadiq was able to pick up first downs after the catch. I didn't realize he fumbled the 2nd and 19 one.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that live. I didn't realize that until I was watching things back the other day.
Kind of fell on it.
yeah, he got punched out from behind, but then he just fell exactly right on top of it, luckily. So I never even noticed it. But I think that was very telling just to see Dante find that comfort in him on those situations where the offense is behind the sticks, be that kind of check down comfort option that you want your tight end to be, your quarterback to feel feel that connection with them where they can hit them underneath and for those easy yards. And then when you do have athletes like Sadiq, he's going to do things after the catch.
Yeah. We're going to get into the injury update here in just a minute, but kind of in that vein, Noah Whittington for the second straight game here warmed up, with the running backs and then didn't play a snap. And I, for my question mark, I just wonder, like, is this running back room successful at the top? Is it able to go win a game like Penn State without Noah Whittington in the picture? And I worry that the answer, as deep as it is, and as talented as some of these guys are in their ability in specific situations, I worry about not having a guy who can really just carry the rock, especially with the experience of a guy like Noah in a game as big as Penn State. Is the room going to be okay if he's not good to go for that game?
Yeah, you'd like to think they are, but it does become a question mark. It's not necessarily that Whittington is a guy that you can feed the rock to on every down because he's not big enough to be durable to that. To get the ball on every down. But he brings another element to this offense where when he's on the field, he can be a touchdown on any play, and in a way that a guy like Dante Hill can be, but with just a lot more trust as a guy in his sixth year in college football instead of his first. I thought Jayden Lamar has gotten. People around the Oregon fan base have not been happy with Jayden Lamar's performance so far, and I didn't love what he did at Northwestern, but I also didn't think he had a ton to work with from that offensive line in terms of what they were giving him. But I thought he was good in that last game, nearly 6 yards per carry, was able to get explosive a couple times, had like a 20-yarder to open things up, and then he's always been really good as a pass and a run blocker. I think we're just gonna have to see that mix of the running backs. I think that's really what makes this running back room so good, is that you just have guys that play these different roles. And so then we saw it this past weekend, they ran their highest 21 personnel formations all season. They were doing a bunch of these two running back looks, and when you get these guys out there, you don't know what the Oregon is going to do because Dante Hill they were lining Dante Hill up in the slot and letting him run routes as a receiver, and then you're bringing Jordan Davison in and bringing him in to block for guys. So you can do a lot of things with these running backs because they have these different skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely still a strength that you point to at Oregon. I just think Whittington, the experience level is what you want. Just like we were talking about with Barry Alexander, there's a level of trust you place in guys like him who've played so much college football. Like Barry Alexander, like you did when you said, "Hey, we trust Dylan, we trust Bo to make the right read here." That's something I worry about. Just when it's crunch time. But I also think these freshmen, across the board, guys like DeCorey and Moore and these running backs, these corners have proven themselves in the early part of the season to be really strong and to make a lot of the right decisions. So at some point, you do have to kind of throw them into the fire.
Yeah, definitely. And then for my final thing that I have questions about, just kind of what we've been saying the entire time, what we've been saying, what we're going to continue to get into this episode. What does it look like against a top tier opponent? Because we've seen it, at the highest levels against Oklahoma State, your performance at the highest levels, playing pretty perfectly against teams like that in Montana State and Oregon State, but they haven't done it against a team like Penn State yet. So that's the big question mark for me right now at this point, is what does it look like when you do get to that Penn State game? Because I was thinking about it. I was like, the run defense got better last game. It looked a lot better, but that's run defense against Oregon State, and that's not defending Penn State's rushing attack, which we'll get into here is one of the better ones in the country. And in the secondary they look good, but you haven't had to face an arm like Drew Outler's, and the offensive line looked good again, but you haven't had to face pass rushers like the ones Penn State's going to bring. So I think that's just the big thing is what does it look like when you face this tough opponent, and that's what we're going to see this weekend. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
That's why we enjoy the game, right?